Creativity and continuous innovation, the game-changing power in a disruptive era. Some people spend their entire lives perfecting a single skill, while the world has transformed hundreds of times within just a few years. Some companies that were once industry giants collapsed simply because they failed to adapt. In an age where technology can reshape human behavior with a single update, creativity and innovation are no longer optional. They are essential for survival. The skill of creativity and continuous innovation is not just about coming up with something new. It is the ability to question the status quo, to break through familiar boundaries, and to be willing to change even when no one demands it. Those with a mindset of continuous creativity are never complacent. They constantly ask themselves, is there a better way? If you don't innovate, someone else will replace you. Be honest with yourself. How long have you been doing things the same way? How long has it been since you learned something new? How long since you stepped out of your comfort zone to challenge yourself with a different approach? In a world where everything changes by the minute, staying still and refusing to innovate is the fastest way to push yourself out of relevance. Here's a harsh but honest truth. Society waits for no one. No matter how good you once were or how loyal you've been, if you don't grow, you'll be replaced. Others may have less experience than you, but they're learning, experimenting, and evolving. Meanwhile, you cling to the comfort of past achievements, thinking it will be enough to keep you safe. But it won't. What you're proud of today may no longer matter tomorrow. Self-respect doesn't lie in what you once achieved. It lies in your ability to look at yourself honestly, admit how far you've fallen behind, and rise again with humility and determination. People with real self-respect never allow themselves to become outdated. They refuse to be seen as obsolete. They understand that creativity and continuous innovation are not optional. They're essential for survival. You may think your current skills are still useful, but ask yourself, will they still be useful 5 years from now? When technology shifts monthly and industries evolve daily, the biggest danger is thinking you don't need to change. The moment you stop learning, stop exploring, stop refreshing your mindset, you begin to quietly disappear from the future. Don't be complacent. Don't assume you've done enough. Don't let yourself be the one who's replaced simply because you refuse to grow. Ask yourself, if today is my best version, will I still be relevant tomorrow? You don't need to change everything overnight, but you do need to start. Begin with small improvements, small questions, small risks. That's how people move forward, one thoughtful step at a time. If this message stirred something within you, if it reminded you of the version of yourself that once dared to grow, then leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Join us on this journey to reclaim your creativity, rebuild your relevance, and rediscover the self-worth that comes not from what you were, but from who you choose to become every single day. Stagnation doesn't always come from a lack of ability. It comes from forgetting that we were once creative. Many of us, as children, were full of imagination. We could turn a leaf into a boat, transform clouds into castles, and create entire worlds from a handful of pebbles. But as we grew older, life gradually asked us to be realistic, to settle down, to follow the standard. And so we began to forget the most precious gift we once had: creativity. Creativity doesn't disappear, it simply falls asleep. It lies somewhere beneath layers of routine, beneath the mechanical repetition of daily tasks, beneath the times we quietly told ourselves, just do it the way it's always been done. Better not risk changing it. No one else is doing it differently. Each of those small phrases seems harmless, but over time, they chip away at our mental flexibility. They slowly strip away our curiosity, our courage, and our natural desire to create. We begin to function, but we stop feeling alive in what we do. People often confuse stability with fulfillment. A stable job, a familiar lifestyle. These are things we often pursue with the belief that they'll bring happiness. But if you've ever found yourself living steadily, yet feeling increasingly disconnected or uninspired, that may be a signal. A quiet alarm ringing from within, asking, what happened to your sense of wonder? This is when the ability to renew ourselves creatively becomes essential. Creativity and innovation are not always about grand changes. Sometimes they begin in very simple ways. How you write an email with more warmth and clarity. How you tidy your desk to invite more focus. How you spend an extra hour learning something new, not because anyone told you to, but because you want to remember what it feels like to be curious again. Every small step like that is a powerful act of reclaiming your creative self. Some people avoid innovation because they believe they're not creative. But the truth is, creativity belongs to all of us. It doesn't require a title, a profession, or even experience. All it asks is that you give yourself permission to try, to fail, to rethink, and to evolve. It asks, will you renew yourself by choice or wait until change is forced upon you? One of the biggest internal obstacles to creativity is the fear of being judged. We're afraid people will say we're odd, unrealistic, or unserious. We fear looking foolish, wasting time, or doing something that doesn't work. But consider this. Anyone you admire, whether an artist, entrepreneur, teacher, or leader, likely went through a time when their ideas were ignored or dismissed. Their difference was once a target for ridicule, and yet they persevered. Why? Because they valued possibility over perfection. Innovation doesn't always bring instant success. In fact, most worthwhile ideas are met with skepticism at first. But that doesn't make them any less valuable. Each time you think differently, even if the result is unclear, you are expanding your mental landscape. You are practicing the most important habit for any meaningful life, refusing to accept stagnation as your norm. You don't need to become someone new. You just need to return to something essential in yourself, the part of you that's still curious, still questioning, still willing to explore. Try asking yourself simple questions. Could I do this task in a more enjoyable way? What if I explained this differently? Is there another perspective I haven't considered yet? These questions are small, but they create space for something bigger to emerge. When you begin to ask different questions, you begin to build different possibilities. Creative thinking also heals. When you fall into repetitive routines without space for thought or joy, it becomes easy to lose emotional vitality. You go through the motions. You wake up, complete tasks, return home, sleep, and repeat, day after day. But one small act of creativity, even just preparing a new recipe, changing the layout of your room, or journaling your thoughts, can reignite your sense of being alive. If you feel like your work has become dull, like your days are blurring together, like the spark is gone, don't rush to blame external things. Don't assume it's because of your job, your colleagues, or your environment. First, look inward. Ask yourself, when was the last time I did something differently, simply for the joy of it? Maybe your creativity isn't gone. Maybe it's just been buried under a to-do list too long. You don't need approval to innovate. You don't need anyone's permission to be creative. All you need is your own quiet courage. To start small, to try imperfectly, and to allow yourself to learn again. Many of the most brilliant breakthroughs in business, education, or everyday life did not begin with certainty. They began with someone saying, let's try this and see what happens. That mindset is the foundation of real progress in teams, in communities, and especially within yourself. Innovation doesn't always mean disruption. Sometimes it just means gentle adaptation, a shift in perspective, a fresh way of doing something you've done 1,000 times. The courage to say, I think this could be better, even if you're the only one who sees it that way. Yet, life doesn't wait. And while you might get by just fine repeating what you already know, there is something inside you that longs to grow, to feel alive, to do meaningful work, to experience depth, not just motion. That part of you is your creativity, and it's never too late to wake it back up. Innovation doesn't always begin with noise. Sometimes it starts with quiet shifts inside you. There's something oddly beautiful about the way major turning points in life begin. Not with grand events, not with loud announcements, but with a small whisper. A soft, almost invisible moment when you pause and think to yourself, I think I've been living like this for too long. That moment isn't dramatic. It isn't a meltdown or a breakdown. It's something much quieter, a subtle unease, a gentle discontent that lingers. You're not unhappy, but you're not inspired either. You show up, do the work, meet the deadlines, hit the marks. But deep down, something feels hollow. Perhaps it's the loss of excitement, of passion, of the quiet joy you once felt in doing things with meaning. And you don't quite know how to get it back. That's when creative renewal from within begins to matter. Innovation is often imagined as disruption, big ideas, major shifts, new technologies. But the most meaningful kind of innovation doesn't start with changing the world outside. It begins with changing the way we feel, the way we think, and the way we talk to ourselves. It's when we gently challenge what we've come to accept as unchangeable. A steady, structured life might be a dream for many, but if you already have that and still feel emotionally distant from yourself, perhaps it's time to look inward and create your own form of escape through creativity. For some, this means learning a completely new skill, like painting or playing an instrument. For others, it's as simple as writing down thoughts before bed, just to stay in touch with what's going on inside. Some people begin their renewal by shifting how they think, moving from autopilot to awareness. They ask questions, observe differently, and engage their world with a bit more intentionality. True creativity doesn't require you to become someone else. It helps you reconnect with parts of yourself that have gone silent. When you begin to question even the most familiar routines, like how you lead a meeting, how you structure your day, how you interact with others, you open a window, you invite in possibility. You begin to look at life with fresh eyes, and that alone is the beginning of innovation. The most significant barrier to creativity is often not a lack of resources or time, but a closed mindset. When you tell yourself things like, "I'm not creative," "I don't have the talent," people like me don't do things like that. You are unconsciously building walls inside your own mind. But when you simply say, "I've never done this before, but today I'll try," you're taking the first brave step toward building something new. Sometimes, creativity is born from limitation. A chef without all the ingredients still finds a way to create a beautiful dish with what's left in the fridge. A teacher with limited tools finds new ways to inspire their students. A parent with very little time creates magical moments in the small rituals of a bedtime story. Constraints don't block creativity. They activate it. They force you to think differently. And once you think differently, you begin to live differently too. At work, creative people aren't always the loudest or the ones with flashy presentations. Often, they're the ones who quietly improve a system, propose a better process, or write a clearer report. They bring value not by shouting for attention, but by simply doing things better. Not bigger, just better. The beauty of creative living is that the more you practice it, the more natural it becomes. You no longer need to force creativity. It becomes a mindset, a way of seeing the world. You begin noticing patterns. You start asking better questions. You get curious, not about what everyone else is doing, but about what else you might do if you dared to look beyond the obvious. You don't need to be in the arts to be creative. You don't need to invent something new. You just need to refuse to let your days become carbon copies of each other. If you're longing for more depth, more meaning, or more excitement, creativity is how you reclaim it. It doesn't promise immediate results, but it does promise a richer experience of life. One where you don't just exist, you design. Where you don't just react, you choose. Where you don't just repeat, you recreate. If you're feeling stuck, maybe the answer isn't to do something big. Maybe it's to do something slightly different. To ask a better question. To pause for 5 more seconds before responding. To read something you normally wouldn't. To try that one thing you've always hesitated about. These are not monumental moves, but they are the soft, powerful acts that begin to change the direction of your days. And eventually, the course of your life. To become creative and innovative, you must first stop comparing yourself to others. One of the most silent, yet powerful forces that holds back creativity is comparison. Comparing yourself to your colleagues, your friends, strangers on social media, or anyone who seems to be ahead of you. The more you observe others achieving things, the smaller your own ideas begin to feel. You start to shrink, to grow silent, and eventually you no longer dare to think differently. But here's a simple truth. Creativity cannot survive in a space that's clouded with inferiority. It needs air to breathe. It needs room to be imperfect, to stumble, to exist in its raw, unfinished form. But if your mind is always occupied by thoughts like, others are better, others are smarter, others have more advantages than me, then you are slowly draining the soil where creativity might have grown. Creativity doesn't require you to be better than anyone else. It only asks you to be honest with yourself, to be willing to say things out loud before they sound impressive, to believe that even a rough idea is worth exploring, that even something messy is worth starting. Because the people who eventually create something remarkable aren't always the most brilliant thinkers. They are simply the ones who dared to try a second, third, 10th time when no one was listening. And most importantly, they don't weigh their progress on someone else's scale. They don't race. They build their own rhythm. They keep showing up on quiet days, on uncertain days, and especially on days when it seems like nothing is moving forward. When you begin comparing yourself to others, you slowly lose your inner freedom. Every person's journey is unique, with different starting points, different strengths, and different paces. One person might be great at tech, another excels at emotional intelligence. Some people think fast. Others need time to digest and reflect, but all of them can be creative if they stop trying to imitate and start trying to express. The same is true for you. You don't need to wait until your idea is as polished as someone else's to begin. You just need to be truthful enough to say, I've never tried this before, but today I'll give it a shot. That alone is a powerful first step toward building a life where innovation becomes second nature. Also, don't fall into the trap of thinking creativity only belongs in creative fields. You might be a teacher, so try delivering a lesson in a way your students haven't heard before. You might be an office worker. Try organizing your workflow to be more collaborative or efficient. You might be a parent at home, so why not tell bedtime stories differently or cook a familiar meal with a new twist? That is creativity. The question isn't whether your profession allows you to be creative. The question is, do you allow yourself to be? So often we are busy trying to fit into the mold of what is acceptable or expected, that we forget we each carry something irreplaceable inside. And it's precisely that uniqueness, when expressed gently and honestly, that becomes creativity. Remember, every remarkable thing in the world was once something no one had done before. A new business model, a teaching method, a social project, a way of living. All of them started with someone who dared to ask, what if we did it differently? And to do that, they had to trust their own thinking, often long before anyone else did. If you see someone shining, don't shrink in comparison. Let their light remind you that it's okay to start small. Let them inspire you, but not to become them. Rather, to become your fullest, realest version. That's when creativity awakens, when you stop trying to fit into a box that wasn't made for you and start shaping your own space in the world. Innovation doesn't follow a fixed formula. It doesn't look the same for everyone. And that's exactly why it's beautiful. You don't need to rush. You don't need to compete. You need to listen to your own rhythm, to protect your ideas when they're still fragile, and to give yourself time to grow into your voice. In this world, there will always be people ahead of you and people behind you. But no one else gets to live your life. No one else sees exactly the way you do. That means your perspective matters, even if it hasn't been fully formed yet. So stop looking sideways. Look forward, not at where others are going, but at where you need to go. Walk with your head high, not because you're the best, but because you are becoming someone original, someone no one else can copy. Successful people aren't those who know everything, but those who keep renewing themselves every single day. In a world that's constantly evolving, what you mastered yesterday might already be outdated today. Methods that once brought great results may no longer be relevant. And if you don't change with the times, you'll find yourself being held back, not by others, but by your own comfort zone. That's why the people who truly thrive are not the ones who know the most, but the ones who never stop refreshing their mindset, habits, and approach. It's easy to notice this in daily life. People who are always learning, always thinking differently, often carry a special kind of energy. They don't fear change, they create it. They don't merely endure pressure, they transform it. And that's what keeps them a step ahead, maybe just a small step. But over the years, that step becomes a lead. Creativity and continuous innovation are not about chasing trends or coming up with brilliant ideas every week. They're about embracing a way of life, a mindset that wakes up each morning not just to repeat tasks, but to find better ways to do them. A quiet refusal to settle for good enough. A deep belief that even the smallest routine can be reimagined. Innovative individuals pay attention. They listen. They don't assume they have all the answers. They're humble enough to learn from both their seniors and juniors, from failure and success alike. They learn from irrelevant details, from unrelated conversations, from patterns no one else notices. They're not arrogant, but they're not timid either. They're simply present, aware, and always open to the idea that things can be better. At work, people with this mindset become the ones others trust in times of uncertainty. In families, they're the ones who avoid robotic communication and instead find meaningful ways to connect. In their personal lives, they avoid burnout and monotony, not because their lives are easier, but because they're always finding new angles, new approaches, new inspiration. You don't need to invent the next iPhone or launch a revolutionary startup to be creative. You just need to have a spirit that refuses to stagnate, a willingness to ask, what else is possible? And a heart that stays curious even in the familiar. The gap between someone who merely fulfills a duty and someone who adds value lies in their ability to create, to innovate, to adapt. In every field, business, education, art, or daily living. Those who regularly update their thinking, challenge their patterns, and look for a better way will always go further. And the most empowering truth of all? This ability isn't reserved for the gifted or the elite. It's a skill that anyone can grow, starting today in small, deliberate ways. If this message rekindled something inside you, a spark you haven't felt in a while, then please leave a like, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next reflections that may help you build a stronger, more forward-thinking version of yourself. Every act of support helps us bring deeper, more meaningful content to more people. Let's grow together.